Every company is interested in reducing costs. However, many struggle with which costs to reduce. Since reducing the wrong ones could impair the company's service or quality, is there a smart way to determine which costs to reduce? According to world-renowned business consulting firm A.T. Kearney, there are two kinds of costs: good costs and bad costs. In order to reduce costs properly, you need to cut bad costs and not the good costs. So how do we differentiate bad costs from good costs? First, ask whether the cost is related to the consumer's actual experience. If the answer is no, then it's a bad cost. But if it's related to the consumer's experience, then check if it also gives real value to the consumer. If it's related to the consumer's experience, but not important to the consumer, then it's also a bad cost. Finally, if it's not only directly experienced by, but also serves as an important value to the consumer, then further examine if the cost is being used in the most efficient manner. If the cost fulfills these three criteria, then it's a good cost, the cost that does not need to be cut. However, if it does not fulfill any one of these three criteria, then it's a bad cost, which should be reduced. Today, let's examine how Kumho Asiana, a Korean airline company, reduced bad costs. In the airline industry, the key to cost management is in the fuel costs. Kumho Asiana reduced bad costs and fuel costs by utilizing the aforementioned 3 points. First, they found and reduced fuel costs unrelated to the consumer experience. For instance, after the plane lands safely, Asiana turns one of the two engines off for 15 minutes. This is because getting to the terminal after landing does not necessarily require the use of both engines. The use of one engine does not make passengers less comfortable either. Through this action, in 2012 alone, they saved about $7.33 million. Next, they cut the cost that was related to the consumer experience, but not of importance. For example, they examined the cart, which is used to serve food and beverages to passengers. It is related to the consumer experience, yet the material it's made out of is not really important. So Asiana changed the heavy aluminum carts to a lighter plastic material. Considering that each plane carried 40 carts, the plane was able to save about 200 kilograms for each load. The same went for in-flight magazines. They realized that not all passengers read the in-flight magazines. For example, a couple was likely to read it together. So instead of placing one magazine per seat, they placed one magazine per 2 seats and were able to reduce additional weight by 30 kilograms. As these weights were reduced, so were the fuel costs. Finally, they cut the cost that was related to the consumer experience and important to the consumer, yet was being used in an inefficient manner. They looked at the water used in flight. Previously, whether it was a 3-hour or 15-hour flight, whether the flight was full or only half full, Asiana flew their planes with full water tanks. Yes, it was inefficient. So from then on, they put into consideration the flight time, number of passengers, and the average water intake per passenger, and reduced the amount of water by 3/4. As a result of cutting bad costs based on these 3 criteria, Asiana was able to save $184 million in 2009 and $400 million in 2013. Are you concerned because you don't know what costs to reduce? Then start by reducing the bad costs. First, consider whether the cost is related to the consumer experience. Second, see whether it further delivers any value to the consumer. And last but not least, don't forget to check whether the cost is being used in the most efficient manner. These steps will guarantee you to save huge amounts of cost without impairing your product or service.